It's an election year, which means perception of the economy is extremely important to politicians running for office. And as persistently positive economic news continues to trickle in, such that even Fox News is reluctantly, but increasingly, acknowledging it, a desperate Donald Trump is trying to take credit for the economy, suggesting that all of this is because the market is predicting that he will win the 2024 election, and therefore he gets all the credit, even though he's out of office, and Joe Biden and the Democrats get none of the credit. This is hilarious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video, and I'm excited to talk about it because it combines like 2 or 3 of my favorite things. Number 1, just good news for Democrats and the American people as a whole. Number 2, good economic news for Democrats and President Biden, which they desperately need in this election. And number 3, just a lot of coping and seething and denial from Donald Trump and to some extent or another, Republicans and Fox News. So this is just a nexus of all the best things. But I want to play this clip from MSNBC, which kind of encapsulates very briefly what's going on with the economy with respect to Trump. It's hilarious. Brace yourselves.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues to take credit for the booming U.S. stock market that's happening under President Joe Biden. On a day where both the Dow and S&P closed at record highs, the former president wrote on social media, in all caps, we should note, this is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors are projecting that I will win, and that will drive the market up. Everything else is terrible. As you might imagine, the Biden campaign was quick to respond to Trump's baseless claim, writing this in a statement: "Thank you, Donald, for lifting up today's strong economic news. But on this planet, Joe Biden is the president."
I also want to add, because he doesn't mention this part, the rest of that statement, which says, "and is the one whose policies are helping achieve historic GDP growth, a stronger than ever stock market, and real job creation after Trump tanked our economy." Great stuff.
Joining us now, White House correspondent for Politico, Adam Cancrin. Adam, good to see you this morning. So let's talk about the economy. Former President Trump, of course, we just showed you his statement. The White House's rapid response team has gotten much better of late and faster, and they hit back.
They have hit back, and that's good, because it's important, as silly as Trump's claims are and how obviously, again, superficially, just on their face, it's a stupid argument for Trump to make. It will be a persuasive argument to millions of Americans because, as we talked about, MAGA is a cult. It has all the markers and identifiers of a cult, which means if Donald Trump is allowed to unopposed, say this nonsense into the ether, millions of Americans will walk away thinking, yeah, even though Trump isn't in office, this is because of him. We should totally vote for him. And that idea will proliferate further. So President Biden and the White House are right to mock and belittle and persistently attack it. Now, I also want to remind everybody that Donald Trump, he predicted, he tried to be a prophet. He predicted for all throughout the 2020 election that the stock market would crash if Joe Biden won the election. And then he predicted, or made that prediction again after President Biden was inaugurated, that at some point there would be a colossal economic catastrophe because of Biden. And I just want to play a couple of clips to remind you of that because it's relevant to what follows.
Biden wins, you're going to have a stock market collapse, the likes of which you've never had. You will have a collapse.
The likes of which we've never had, so presumably even greater than the Great Depression. But again, he repeated those prophecies in 2020 and in 2023. Play some more clips.
If he's elected, the stock market will crash.
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
And when there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months. Because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
And the U.S. stock market continues to hit record high after record high. You're looking at
As President Biden has repeatedly said, Trump is effectively already Herbert Hoover. Now, in response to all this, President Biden has made his 20-second video touting the positive economic news that we've just talked about just from the past couple of weeks. Let's play the clip and then take note of his language, how he describes this, his demeanor when describing it. And we're going to contrast it to Trump because this is also important.
Just last week, we saw the biggest jump in 30 years in how positive consumers are feeling about the economy. And just today, we learned the economy of the United States grew by 3.1% last year. But thanks to the American people, America now has the strongest growth, the lowest inflation rate of any major economy in the world.
thanks to the American people. Thanks to the American people. And again, how does Donald Trump try to take credit for all this? Well, he says this is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good. Investors are projecting that I will win, right? So again, note the contrast between these two men. And yet another reason why Joe Biden is cognitively, ethically, morally, spiritually just a better person and therefore a better president than somebody like Donald Trump, who tries to take all the credit. And by the way, he doesn't deserve any of the credit because he's not in office. He's not influencing market forces to any reasonable extent or another. But he's trying to take all the credit, and he gives himself all the credit, whereas President Biden gives it back to the American people. And yet Joe Biden will, thank God, he will take shots at Donald Trump with increasing sharpness and draw the contrast with increasing sharpness between the economy under him and the economy under Trump. This is a clip from a recent speech he gave.
Folks, the bottom line is our economy has grown more in the last 6 months than it ever did at any point in Trump's entire 4 years in office.
Again, our economy, the economy that all of us created, but not just me, but also Democrats in general, Republicans in general, every American citizen, we helped create this economy. Again, Joe Biden or Donald Trump tries to take all the credit for himself. So other things I want to point out, we just learned that the U.S. added an average of 224,000 jobs per month in 2023, above the 175,000 average pre-pandemic under Trump, right? Again, note the contrast. Even when we grade Trump on a curve, he is simply no match. But more positive economic news as well that was talked about in the Biden video that we just played. Americans are finally starting to feel confidence in the state of the U.S. economy, right? More so than in the past 2 years. So we're starting to see a climb back to pre-pandemic levels of economic satisfaction. That is vital when you consider the staggering disparity between Democrats and Republicans with polls with respect to the economy, right? Again, the macroeconomic data are clear on this. The economy performs better when Democrats are in power, but Republicans have enjoyed a 30 to 40 year advantage with respect to the perception on the economy. There's a mismatch, and as great as it is to have the facts on our side, at the end of the day, perception matters more, which is why this consumer sentiment will hopefully continue to trend upwards as we head towards the election, because it's going to be very unlikely that President Biden can win re-election if the gulf on the economy is so staggering. That would defy historic precedent. President Obama, for example, tended to poll beneath Mitt Romney in 2012, but they were close enough that President Obama was able to win re-election. You can't have a colossal disparity. It's unlikely that Democrats will be able to surpass it, but they need to narrow that gap as much as possible. And it helps when the Fox propaganda network is willing to talk about positive economic news to an audience which is hostile to Biden and to Democrats. So I want to play a couple of clips where even they reluctantly drive home the point that President Biden's economy is very good.
But are they right? Does America now have the best recovery?
Well, yes.
Yes, America has the best economic recovery out of every advanced economy on earth with respect to COVID. But wait, there's more.
Well, there is good news in the economy, Brett. I mean, inflation has indeed moderated. Growth has been strong. The stock market is hitting records.
And that was Bret Hume. Bret Hume, the gravelly face. I mean, he's never met a Democrat that he doesn't like, and he loves grade Republicans on a curve. And even he's like, yeah, there's some positive economic news. Neil Cavuto is pretty reasonable, and he talks about the good news on the economic front all the time. But even hearing it from him, again, is still important.
One thing the Biden administration likes to point to is that the economy is getting better and the markets are reaching records almost every day. In fact, today, the Dow and the S&P continued their winning record streak.
Yes, and it's important for President Biden to talk about that. Now, I want to make it clear, though, to be fair, right, to be eminently fair. The fact of the matter is, and we've talked about this in previous videos, presidents, while they are the most powerful and influential people on earth, the sitting president of the United States is the most powerful man on earth for a reason. They're not gods, and they don't single-handedly shape macroeconomics. They never have, they never will. So as Paul Krugman points out when he addresses, he's an economist, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, as a matter of fact, when he addresses Trump's absurd claims about the stock market, he is also fair. He points out, listen, no president is really responsible for the stock market. They play some, they can potentially play some role, but none of them are single-handedly responsible for it. And I think it's important to point that out. There are three crucial rules about the relationship between stock prices and broader concerns. First, the stock market is not the economy. Second, the stock market is not the economy. Third, the stock market is not the economy. But don't tell Donald Trump, who treated a rising stock market during his presidency as proof of his economic prowess. And the fact that the stock market has been hitting new highs under President Biden is clearly driving Trump crazy, leading to outbursts like the one he posted on social media yesterday, claiming that investors are driving stock prices higher because they think Biden will win in November. Taking credit for rising stock prices is silly, even if you are the president, right? And that's Krugman's point, is the president is not single-handedly responsible for rising stocks, but claiming credit where you aren't is, can I say this, demented when you aren't. And it adds to what has always puzzled me most about the Trump phenomenon. Why don't more voters see him as a ridiculous figure? It's a great question, but the bottom line is he is an effective cult leader, which is why we need to persistently address this and say, no, you're not the president. You are less powerful and influential than you were when you were president. And to the extent that we can credit any president for the health of the stock market, you get none because, and this is important, you're not president, Donald. So, and hopefully you won't be again. The last thing I want to do is remind you of this Washington Monthly article, which was written, I think, about a week ago. This is really important because it also reaffirms some of the things that I've told you about. It's written by an economist who points out, listen, President Biden's stronger economic growth was not by happenstance. He and congressional Democrats actively promoted it with the American Rescue Plan, the March 2021 stimulus enacted over united Republican opposition, and the November 2021 Infrastructure Act that Trump talked about but never delivered. We can actually point to things that President Biden and Democrats did to help promote and create a healthy economic recovery. The CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, the vaccine rollout, that's huge because it allowed the economy to open back up safely. So we're not just like saying, oh, it happened under Biden, therefore he gets all the credit. We're saying it happened under Biden. Biden actually did things in terms of executive and legislative policy that contributed to the economic growth, which means he gets at least some credit. And we need to shout that from the rooftops and hope that the positive economic trends continue to trend upwards as we get closer to the election, because it will play a decisive role in shaping the outcome of that election. Let me know what you think in the comments.